They excel in high damage per shot with the best base accuracy stat of all the classes, and are responsible for taking out enemies in the back row. These are your rifle tactical dolls. Now, to throw down some pretense first, the class is not called sniper rifle. It is indeed rifle. It seems that any gun that isn't classified as an assault rifle, such as battle rifles, bolt action rifles, sniper rifles, and DMRs, all fall under this class for Girls Frontline. Though RFB is classified as an AR instead of a rifle, but I mean, hell if I know why that's so. Following suit with the characteristics of rifles in real life, rifles in Girls Frontline all generally, quote-unquote, effectively attack enemies from a distance, and thus target enemies in the back row with priority. Since the enemy DPS units are usually in the back row, this helps relieve the pressure off of your tanks, and you can see it being more effective as you progress through the story chapters. As if to balance that, Dragoons exist. Dragoons are units that have high movement speed and damage who are located in what would be the middle row, and thus act as a hybrid tank and DPS unit. These are a bigger threat, and if they're not taken care of swiftly, they will demolish your tanks with ease. Along with the characteristic of engaging enemies at a long range, another accurate depiction exists being the limit of rifles in regards to the rate of fire. It's pretty simple. A bolt action rifle will not be able to outfire a semi-automatic rifle without any kind of external rate of fire buffs in the game. Though rifles are always used to target enemies in the back, after a stealth patch of August 19th of 2007, rifles now targets the enemies attacking them first, then targets enemies in the back row. This isn't always going to be the best case scenario because that means they're focusing on tanks instead of DPS units who are taking out your tanks. It also negatively affects for those trying to hobo run with rifles on 0-2, as they'd have to first get rid of the tanks in front before being able to pick off any enemy DPS in the back. The workaround to this is that you'd have to move a rifle during the shooting animation, similar to the machine gun reload cancel, and move them back where they were, and it resets their targeting and targets the enemy furthest away from them like it normally would. Do this if the tanks are too tanky or if you need to kill the DPS quickly in the back. Generally, a rifle can either be classified as a bamboo rifle or a self-buffing rifle. You have Springfield and Mosin to represent the small bamboo roster, NTW and M91 for large bamboos, and WA2000 and Leonfield for self-buffing rifles. There are rifles with unique skills, but I'll talk about them once we get closer to the release date. Do feel free to research them on your own though. Bamboo rifles are classified under small and large bamboos. Rifles with initial cooldown of 10 seconds and lower skill scaling are classified as small bamboos, and rifles with 15 seconds but higher scaling are classified as large bamboos. Bamboo shots, similar to grenades and molotovs, have a 100% hit rate regardless of the enemy invasion. Though small bamboos have a lower skill scaling, they have a shorter initial cooldown and can help relieve the pressure on your tanks by killing enemies. On the other hand, large bamboos have higher skill scaling but longer initial cooldowns, and that means more pressure for your tanks. Since bamboo skills have specific targeting criteria, you want to make sure you don't waste it accidentally on a mob, so making sure you can clean them up before activating it is crucial. Though in recent days, bosses have had their HP tank beefed up so much that it's almost impossible to kill bosses with a single bamboo shot, and makes them pretty obsolete in terms of competitiveness. Now, there are currently 7 different bamboo variants without getting into unique skills too much. The first being Locked Shot, and M1 Grand is there to rep it. Locked Shot always targets the enemy the rifle was originally targeting once activated. After that, next up is Steady Shot, representatives being Mosin, Springfield, and M91. Steady Shot targets the enemy furthest away from the rifle at the time of activation. After that is Aimed Shot, its representative being SVT-38. This targets elite mob units such as Manticores, Jaguars, or bosses. Then you have Interdiction Shot with NTW representing it. Interdiction Shot always targets the enemy closest to the rifle once activated, so make sure you're taking care of those tanks before you use it on a boss. Following up is the skill unique to Car 98, Chain Shot. Chain Shot is basically an upgraded lock shot. It will target the enemy the rifle is firing at upon activation and shoot 2 bamboos at them. There are other bamboo skill variants, but I'll be talking about them more in a future video introducing the dolls once they get released on the global server or near release date. Now, most bamboo skills will consume 1.5 seconds after activation to aim and then fire at the target. There are exceptions to this, which pertains usually to unique skills such as Car 98, who aims down 1 second before shooting each of her 2 shots. Now, after bamboo skills, you have self-buffers. It's a pretty standard skill, buffs their own fire rate or damage, and they always give out consistent performance compared to bamboo rifles who have dips and peaks in their performance, so to speak. Though for bosses who use skills and thus become invincible during the activation of it, they aren't always the best option compared to bamboo rifles, since bamboos can just nuke the hell out of bosses before they even get a chance to activate their skill and just kill them in 1 shot. But for bosses where you can't nuke with bamboos, self-buffing rifles are going to be the better choice. As I mentioned earlier, rifles deal insane damage per shot they take due to the characteristics they've inherited from their real-world counterparts. But most of the time, this leads them to overkilling enemy units more often than not. Not only that, if 2 rifles' rate of fire just happens so that they target the same enemy with low HP, both of them may fire at the mob and you're going to be losing a lot of DPS from it. Thus, they're usually paired with handguns, who are usually able to finish off the enemy without wasting too much DPS. Not to mention, rifles buff handguns with their tile buffs, and they synergize well together. Going along that train of thought, all rifles, with the exception of the Carcano siblings who are future additions, buffs handguns with cooldown reductions. 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, and 5 stars all respectively reduce the cooldown by 10%, 12%, 15%, and 18%. Most handguns have a cooldown of 12 seconds and 8 seconds of effect at skill level 10. As so, it is possible to maintain a handgun skill almost indefinitely if you can manage to hit the 30% cooldown reduction cap. Now, unlike with some of the other classes, you really don't have needs for dupes in the case with rifles. Though the only problem is that in terms of performance, there is a clean line between the higher and lower quote-unquote tiers for rifles. Meaning that balancing isn't the greatest with rifles compared to some of the other classes. The Spring and Mosin comp that I personally adore is more of an endgame composition due to the amount of grinding needed for their special equipment, as well as upgrading them and calibrating them. So if you choose to level either of them right now, you're playing the super long-term investment game here. Most bamboo rifles are obsolete at endgame due to the difficulty and aren't mainstream. Thus, rifles that get used are primarily self-buffing rifles. From the 4 and 5 star roster, you only have WA2000, SVD, Leonfield, G28, and IWS who are endgame competitive, and maybe T5000 and FN-49 Mod 3 that gets added into the edition. G43 is able to remain viable due to her skill being optimized for night ops. But outside of that, that's about it in terms of being endgame competitive. Even though we've been getting a lot of new 4 and 5 star rifles within the last few months, these rifles are barely used outside of night op events due to the oversaturation of great ARs to pick from, who will usually outperform rifles during day ops. So you really have no need for rifles other than for night ops. Even the queen of 3-star rifles, M14, has trouble in later chapters due to her lack of firepower, which she'll need to compensate for with buffs from somewhere else. Do note though, from the moment of talking about balancing issues with the class to this current point, this doesn't just pertain to the major 3 servers. This applies to the global server as well. There will be some other rifles that may work in some scenarios, but if you want flexible, consistent performers that are highly competitive endgame, the list of rifles I named earlier is all you need. And it's been that way for at least a year now with very little variation. Any other rifle will be specialists in their own field, but will lose out to those on the list in any other general scenario. Hopefully things will change with additional Mindmap Remodels additions or with better 4 and 5 star dolls. And that concludes the rifle breakdown. Just a few public announcements to make. The first being my Patreon page is now live. If you'd like to support me, I'm just letting you know that option is now available. The second announcement being my Discord server is also live, and you can stop by if you'd like and say hi and chat with the rest of the community. The links for both of them are in the description below. That's it for this video. The next video is going to be on hobo running, followed up by the handgun breakdown. I hope this video has been helpful and look forward to the next.